King. I said,
That's
everybody
what-
calls him King.
And he found it, cleaned it up. He said he could put in a museum, or if the family wanted. I thought they said good story. Alex has worked so hard to get it so on
Talked to
Saturday.
Darlene, Saturday, that's what she was telling me.
Brother who it was his man's son. And his well, it's in Wayne, but we can get you
I
the
think he's been in and out, she said it took him.
pictures.
Fail originally.
I just time.
I thought that, is that no interest? That's social media.
He went down a lot
I
of
thought you knew Alex, I mean Russ, and this is son Alex.
I saw Cheryl the other day.
Because,
Cheryl used to work here, can't think of her last name.
Yeah,
But I'll be in touch.
Town clerk, Cheryl.
that's what I thought we were gonna do.
throwing me a couple of paragraphs.
Y'all think of that?
Holding up production now.
You're holding up on count of me?
You are holding up.
Like it's
Okay.
I'm ready for this.
When you producing? Thursday? When you produce? Thursday? When do you produce?
Well, we're hoping to finish together the content by the end of the month.
Yeah.
And start laying out.
Yeah.
Oh, so I got.
You ready, Mr. Administrator? On a meeting to order, this being Tuesday, July the 20th, 2021. The first item on our agenda will be the invocation. Alderman Honeycutt, would you have that, please?
Heavenly Father, we thank you once again for your blessings. We thank you for the rain that we needed bad. Pray that you'll continue to bless and be with the town, with the citizens, keep our people that serve safe, and help us to do your will. Amen.
In accordance with the Code of Ethics adopted by the board, all town commissioners have a duty to obey all applicable laws regarding official actions, to uphold the integrity and independence of the office, and to conduct the affairs of the governing board in an open and public manner. Is there any item on the agenda, the outcome of which will have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable financial impact for any board member? Also, does any board member have a financial interest in any public contract coming before this board today? To approve the agenda.
So,
Second,
second.
any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Yeah, right now when we consent. Next item is gonna be the consent agenda. And, there's 4 items listed here, but one of them we haven't, conducted an interview yet, so number 4 is not gonna be voted on tonight. Anyway, I'll call on, our administrator, talk about items 1, 2, and 3. Eric?
Well, number 1, of course, is just the approval of your minutes. That's your regular agenda item. The other consent items are items that are intended to not be controversial, and categories. So one of them is simply, we're switching our insurance coverage for the town from bankers insurance to the municipal, in the North Carolina League of Municipalities. So that's the second item, but that's just requesting the authority to do that. The third is to establish a social media policy, which simply just outlines how we use social media, who has the responsibilities and the authorities to publish on behalf of the town, and how we conduct that. So it's more procedural, and just guidelines on how we utilize social media.
Okay, you've heard the explanation of the three items on the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, next item will be a public forum where the public's invited to attend this meeting in person or view it on Facebook Live. All items related to agenda items not published on the website may be viewed in advance of the meetings in person at Town Hall, 90 Up Mountain Road in Woodfin. At this time, we'll open the floor for any citizen to address the board. If you wish to address the board, if you'd come up to the podium up here where the microphone is and give us your name and then limit your talk to 3 minutes. Anyone like to speak? All right, come over to the podium.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm Hazel Thornton, and I live here in Woodfin. I have some comments regarding the direction of our town. For some time now, there's been great concern about the lax zoning and development standards in Woodfin. Much of our terrain is not buildable. Much of our terrain is not buildable for various reasons, and we should come to terms with that in short order. During the last decade, far too many acres have been inappropriately zoned for high-density mountain village, and now we are moving even further in the wrong direction by approving town codes that will eliminate the population density limit requirement altogether. I think that was a typo. This is not the pathway to clean air and water for the next generation of humans and wildlife. It is not the pathway toward a community with a sound infrastructure that we can be proud of. The Art Deco architects of the 20s left us beautiful structures that we treasure today. What will Woodfin look like in 100 years? Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments?
Hello. My name is Colin Willis, and I also am a resident of Woodfin at 4 Sunny Ridge Drive. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. So like many of my fellow Woodfin citizens, I'm seriously concerned about this commission's elimination of the height and density restrictions of our building ordinances, which adversely impact our community. But before getting to the changes to those ordinances and the how they were approved, I'd like to zoom out a bit and try to understand the why behind these changes. To better understand the rationale behind the decisions and past decisions that go so strongly against the wishes of the citizens you serve. I've racked my brain trying to understand the motivation around these ordinance changes, and that they go hand in hand with prior developments in Woodfin that plant large and invasive developments in small, hamlet-like, single-family neighborhoods. I simply can't understand why these developments go so strongly and go on against the wishes of the citizens of this community. The only thing I can come up with is that it's revenue acquisition, which is fair. And granted that there were very poor zoning decisions, in my opinion, that were made in the past, that's water under the bridge. But if the end goal is revenue creation, then I think there are other ways than instead of implanting these large, invasive, and intrusive developments in our neighborhoods, there are ample opportunities for commercial development to bring businesses, restaurants, shops, affordable housing, and other responsible development along the old Weaverville Highway corridor and other places that aren't intrusive into these neighborhoods. and having a vibrant commercial center would raise tax revenue and grow the tax base incrementally beyond what it is currently experiencing, in my opinion. Enough said on that. I'm now moving back to the how the height and density ordinances were changed and why so many of the citizens you serve are concerned about these changes, which open the floodgates for even more egregious development. Firstly, I understand there was no time allocated to public debate or comments, so your constituents' voices could be heard on these changes. Also, I've scoured the May 18th meeting minutes, agenda, the PowerPoint that was presented, etc., and cannot find any mention to the specific references to the approved height and density changes. Maybe they were transparently and openly discussed. I don't know. But if not, and considering the upcoming elections in November for commissioners, I believe it is fair and critical that the citizens understand and know the current commissioners' positions on what they were voting for when they eliminated these density and height restrictions. If the specific ordinances changes were clearly expressed, just tell me, and that will do for knowing how we are to vote in November. And if not, if they were not made clear, I believe it's appropriate even to have a roll call vote tonight, or a roll call tonight, to know whether or not the commissioners knew what they were voting on it when these changes were made. Thank you for your time.
Okay, anyone else wish to speak?
Hi, I'm a newer resident of Woodfin, and I was born and raised in Asheville, so long time roots here. I have never been to a town council meeting before, so I'm a little bit nervous about this. But I was really compelled to come here today to speak out against the zoning ordinance. And specifically, I guess the specific example that has brought this to my attention is the bluffs. I'm really concerned about the health of the river. I'm concerned about the safety of our roads and with traffic of Riverside Drive. I'm concerned about all the runoff downstream from that development. We're supposed to have the water park. What is that going to do for safety for folks floating down the river? And what is that going to do for flooding downstream? I've seen firsthand how Asheville area has had flooding increase over my lifetime. What are we doing to address that? In the towns, trying to figure out what the status of this project has been kind of difficult. And it brought me on the website looking at the town council's guiding principles in the 10-year plan that's listed on the website for development. And those guiding principles were preserve the small town quality of life, provide a basic level of services to the community, maintain a low tax rate, and promote environmental and economic sustainability. I do not see how relaxing these zoning ordinances fulfill any of those criteria and help to promote environmental or economic sustainability. And then another matter that I would like to speak on, very separate from this, that's a lot shorter. I would love for you all to reconsider keeping things open to virtual participation. Something that the pandemic changed for us was that we all had to get used to Zoom meetings and virtual meetings. With that, we have opened the door for people with disabilities and with mobility issues and with scheduling constraints to also participate in civic life, and I think that we should keep that door open. So I was saddened to see that that has closed, and I would would really appreciate reconsideration of that. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Sue McQueen. I'm a resident of Woodfin, and I'd like to thank you for allowing us to speak our mind here. I agree with everyone and what they've said here. I'd like to keep it short and sweet. And as a resident of Woodfin, the reason I chose to live here is because of the small town community and the community of it and the beauty of it. And everything that's been discussed here tonight has an impact greater than Woodfin. The climate control issues and everything, this high density, the bluffs issue and everything, doing all these things change the irrigation, it changes the wildlife and the nature and how everything reacts to everything, and it throws it even more out of whack. Our planet is seriously in trouble. And I don't see anybody in Winford wanting to make it any worse. So I'm hoping that you seriously consider these things about the zoning things being changed, about the high density and whatnot, because it will impact the world in the long run. We all still got to live here, and so do our children.
Okay, anyone else?
Hi, I'm Robert McGee. I've been a Woodfin property owner since the 90s, and I appreciate you having me here. I've written you a lot of letters, and tonight I didn't prepare anything. I thought I'd tell you that I appreciate that you do a little prayer before you start your meeting. I think it's nice. Whether or not you believe in God or whatever your beliefs are, I think it's good. I have read the Bible. I know there's some good things in there, but loving your neighbor, doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. And so I'm deeply concerned that you've removed the height and density requirements. It reminds me of another story. Guy's drowning at sea. And he says, I'm going to pray to God that I get saved. A boat comes. Guy tries to save him. He says, no, I'm waiting for God. Keeps drowning. Helicopter comes. He goes, hey, here to save you. The guy says, don't worry, I'm waiting for God. Well, he dies. Goes up to heaven. Tells God, I'm pissed off, God. You didn't save me. I was drowning out in the ocean. You didn't save me. He says, well, I sent you a boat. I sent you a helicopter. Why do I say this? Well, like I said, I didn't write anything, but I just thought of it. It was sitting out there. Well, have you looked around? God sent you a pandemic. Fires, forest fires all over the West. Floods in Germany, places they never thought could be flooded. And here you are sitting on the third oldest river in the world. We got to respect it. We need you to put those height requirements, the density requirements back in there for us, for you, for kids, for grandkids. Because there's a serious problem if you don't do this. You let a developer come in now with no height requirements, no density requirements, and then you put them back in. Well, you open yourself up for legal issues, because the next developer is going to come in and go, well, you let that other guy build 18 stories high, put 5,000 people next to the river. You got to let me do it. So I just hope you'll consider doing what's right for the future. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else wish to speak? Okay, I'm gonna ask our planner, Adrian Eisenhower, if she'd explain the height requirement and what we did and why we did it.
So the recent amendments to the zoning ordinance were in response to 160D land use legislation. Some of the changes were required by the statute, some were optional. Some of the changes were an effort of the Board of Commissioners and town staff to incorporate best practices and organization into their current ordinance document. Excuse me. The focus for these amendments was on procedural requirements and best practice, again in response to 160D, but it was also an opportunity for us to take an approach of not a Band-Aid approach to amendments, but a comprehensive approach to amendments. So as far as the height requirements go, that wasn't a requirement of 160D, but it was a conditional use permit that was required for that approval. Well, a conditional use is not, height is not a use. So that shouldn't have been the vehicle used for that approval. So the 35-foot height requirement is still there. They can exceed that with a letter from the fire chief. I understand that you don't think that's stringent enough, and we're not done with the ordinance. These are not final changes. These were the first opportunity up for us to take a look at the ordinance and make the changes we need to make so that we have the vehicles in place for developers and community and everybody to use in the development process that we didn't have there before. So that's the story about the height. The density, there's no maximum density in Mountain Village zoning district anymore. We have changed that zoning district to be approved by a conditional zoning process. So that's a rezoning with conditions on it. So that allows the community, the applicant, the Board of Commissioners to comprehensively review a development proposal and discuss the conditions that go on it and discuss the issues that it might create and agree on a plan that's going to fit the zoning ordinance and the long-range plan of the town. So that's why there's no maximum density on that, but there are procedural requirements in place that the developer is going to have to go through to get that final approval, and they include getting feedback from the community, getting traffic impact analysis done, answering all the questions of the site analysis. All that has to be done before they can even come to the board. So it was an opportunity for us in the zoning district that has the most density that could be allowed, the largest parcels, to have a more transparent process for the community and the board and the developer. So that's why those changes were made.
May I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
If it's still true, I forget the NC state statute 260 or something that says, I think it came up in Superior Court when the 300 Bear Cove Road development was being done, where you guys got sued because under that law, if a developer's proposal meets the requirements of the zoning, there's nothing that can be done to stop that development as long as it meets those.
That's for conditional use, which is different than conditional zoning. So conditional use is a quasi-judicial process. And we were trying to stay away from that process because we see how well that worked for the Bluffs. It's not working. We're not able to hear back from the community on that. So if we stuck with that, then the only feedback we could get from you guys is if you have standing to that project. And so this is a whole different approval process. So it opens up what standards apply, the conditions that apply that are proposed by the developer or the Board of Commissioners with feedback from the community. So there aren't standards that have to be met that the board has to approve. It's a negotiation.
I sat here 3 years ago about that place down on 300 Bears Cove Road. And the developer clearly lied about many elements. Clearly. We were invited to come here, and I found out after the fact that it was all a done deal. They just let us come and move our lips and talk from our hearts, and it didn't make sense. So I'm here again, and I have found that it's a very distrustful experience that I've had in the past. How are you going to stop it now? They said they were building some of the units for senior citizens, so that meant there was a master on the main, but there was still 2 bedrooms and a bath upstairs. They said they were building homes for low income, and we checked with the city planner or whatever your title is, your predecessor, and it was $150,000, and theirs started at $250,000. They talked about the traffic, but they didn't complete the traffic. And all these statements were given to us who live in the community, and they were blatant lies. So how are we going to be able to trust what happens now?
I mean, the Mountain Village District, this conditional zoning process is one thing, and it's zoning related, so some of those issues aren't going to be covered in the zoning approval. But if we're talking about zoning and we're talking about conditional zoning, it's a written agreement between the developer and the board on what those conditions are and what they get approved for. So they have to follow that, or they'll be out of compliance with their permit.
$50 a day fine. So why did we do a moratorium, reduce the density, and then we changed it again after doing this big comprehensive review for the December changes? Why did you undo that?
The comprehensive review didn't happen until after the December changes were made.
Why did you change it in December?
Because we needed to lift the moratorium, and that's what we decided to do at that time with the limited information I had at that time. But then I dived into the comprehensive review based on the 160D state statute legislation that had to be done by July 1st, and looked at the whole ordinance and looked at the approval process and looked what we were requiring for developers to submit to us, and it wasn't clear and it wasn't concise. And if we'd stuck with what we had, we wouldn't be able to ask the developer to require them to turn this in.
I appreciate that we don't think that you should build 1,400 units with one piece of paper on 8.5/11 sketch without.
Which is what we had
additional-
before.
And I appreciate the changes there, but I think what she's saying, the concern is, it doesn't matter what the community says, ultimately the board can approve anything and everything. And where the fire chief has all the say on height, and he basically, in his testimony, said, if you have fire suppressants, that's good enough for me. So what limits it from having sky rises like in Asheville? Why wouldn't we have 10-story apartments and or
Again-
10-story hotels? And if you don't, it's arbitrary without any sort of at least maximum or some other standards.
Again, these were procedural changes based on land use legislation that I had to get done by July 1st, and that's where the comprehensive review of the ordinance came in. We are not done looking at the ordinance, but we also need to update our comprehensive plan. It's a work in progress, and we're working on it, and the next step is the comprehensive plan. But
So for height, could you have made it some other criteria as opposed to a special use permit without making it just the sole discretion of the fire chief? There's no public input in that process.
And there's no control.
There's no
Money
input
talks,
from
you
the
know that.
planning committee.
And to say that they're not gonna wanna increase things next to on the bus property.
that has to go, it has,
Our little single family homes with these crazy buildings.
it has to go through that conditional zoning process. So it's gonna be, it's more transparent review, there's still permits they're gonna have to get outside of this zoning approval. So, again, we're not done with the ordinance, but I didn't wanna make a Band-Aid change to height and not make it to anything else. And so I just simply removed the sentence, this requires a conditional use permit. Because it's not a use, it's a density requirement.
And we're looking at these changes, not just for one development, but for any other development that does
Yeah,
come in.
that's what we're concerned
And so,
about.
well,
This is just the
we
beginning.
share the concern. We share the concern. This board shares the concern. They instructed us to make the changes that need to be changed as a start. But this took decades to get to where it was. So you have to understand, months she was in the job and has been in the job. We are trying to make changes. So if you're not satisfied, I can't make it go faster. And the law only lets us do so much. That's the state law. So talk with your legislators, not this body.
Right, but you also made changes that weren't required, which, did you say the height requirement?
And
wasn't
not done,
required?
not completed.
But it's not, it's terrible practice. It needed to come out, and while I was doing the comprehensive review of the ordinance, the things that absolutely did not need to be there anymore for the next developer
It just
needed to come
happens
out.
to be happening while
It seems very convenient.
someone can not provide a comprehensive plan,
Well, so
but
I don't-
can get the height.
I see that, I understand why you would think that, but was I supposed to leave it there for the next developer while I waited to figure out exactly what we were gonna do with the height? I was trying to clean it up. In 6 months, I was trying to make these changes and be compliant with state law while having better processes in place.
We'll see what the board does, the election's this November.
Yeah, we appreciate all the answers. It seems like the best way to not do a Band-Aid approach is to just do a moratorium and get it all straight and do a moratorium on the mountain building.
Can you do a moratorium just to change ordinances?
Why do you change ordinances in the the middle of big processes like this with the development on
We
your road.
can change the ordinance, but right now we can't do a moratorium on new developments, based on these reasons.
It's just a coincidence they have.
Have to realize most of these ordinances was wrote in 1972.
Yeah.
Things have changed.
You guys, I think, are supposed to be concerned about us who pay our taxes and live here, and chose to live here because of the trees and because of the animals and the waterways. And you guys who have to protect the environment. Community matters. And we're here, not enough people, but we're here. And it feels like that, you know, I may have to leave here before I want to because of the traffic, because of the noise, because of the dirt. It's getting to be more unpleasant than pleasant.
I do have one final question for Eric, because I know you just signed the $700,000 contract to design the Whitewater Wave. What are you gonna do a couple years down the line when they say, okay, there's a serious problem because we can only build the wave when the river is at its lowest point, which we all know, which the logistics required to do that is, that's monumental in its own right. But what if you got a big development of 10 and 12-story buildings going on right across at the same time, dumping mud and silt into the area of the Whitewater Wave?
That's not a question I can answer or going to answer. I mean, I think we all have the question before us, don't we? I'm no different from you.
Right.
I'm asking the same question.
You might be at battle,
So-
you might be at war with your own council, is what I'm saying.
That's not necessarily the case. This council has given us direction to make these changes, and they are decades in the making. So it's gonna take some time to unwind those. That's just a fact, and I'm sorry that it can't be done sooner. Truly, I am sorry about that, but it cannot be. And the state also values property rights. The state and the laws are written to also value property rights. I can't change that. I must operate within those confines, and all of us must. And so again, if your arguments are about land use, your arguments are not necessarily only with this body. So take that for what it's worth. And there are others who are responsible for regulating certain things, stormwater and runoff, EPA, FEMA, Army Corps of Engineers. They look at those matters as well. And so if we're prohibited from doing that, we will be prohibited from doing that.
You know, I think growth is inevitable. I mean, it's gonna happen. I mean, we can't protect ourselves from growth, right? But I think, and some of my fellow citizens may disagree with me on that, but I think we're asking you to manage the growth, to do it responsibly and keep things as tamped down and livable and sustainable as possible.
I don't think anyone here disagrees with that. No one would say they disagree with that. So this is not necessarily adversarial. This is where we are.
I wanted to make sure you knew that. Well, we need your help in that. You're all we got. Outside of our state legislatures, yes.
Does the council have the authority to make zoning rules and establish them, or does that have to come from the state?
We do the zoning, okay? But the state dictates how it gets done.
Okay, so you could put a density or height or whatever in the code for Woodson, if you were in charge of it.
Yes.
And what is it that takes 10 years to do that?
Well, we're not saying it takes 10 years to do that. We're saying that the current ordinances have been in place, some of them since 1971 when the town was created. And of course, the issue with regard to zoning it takes a lot of people looking at it to determine what the proper zoning is in what area. You know, places, areas change. Certain zoning that was appropriate 20 years ago may not be appropriate today. And that's what our planning board is going to be looking at very strongly. They're the ones that propose changes to the zoning ordinances. But that's a procedure that has to be gone through.
So it goes from the planning board.
It goes through the planning
council,
board.
That can be voted in and.
Correct.
Okay.
In a perfect world, you have a comprehensive plan, which isn't 10 or 12 years old, that is current, That takes time. That is a lot of public input. That's the voice of the community. That's what should precede any zoning ordinance changes in a perfect world. Unfortunately, we live in this where everything is just merged into one. And so trying to sort it out and tease it out is not a simple matter. It's just
And a lot of these changes cannot be made, we do have to comply with state law. Just like on the, I think someone mentioned 300 Bear Cove Road. Well, 300 Bear Cove Road, the decision that was made, the developer went to court on that and won, based on the state law, and he had to pay his fees as a result of that too. Even though the town did its best, with regard to the Board of Adjustment hearings and whatever, to make the right decision, still, we had to comply with state law.
Could you tell me what is the status of the Bluffs building
We don't know.
situation? You don't
I
know?
wish, no, I mean, we know that the application is still pending. But as far as if it's going to go through, we really don't know.
Can you
That's
tell
a
me
big
if the man
development.
who wants to do it owns that land?
I don't even know that yet. I do know that he had a contract to buy the land. And during the large part of the time that he was dealing with us, he had a contract to purchase it. Whether he has actually closed and purchased it, I don't know.
Public record session. And what about 300 Barrett's Cove Road? What's happening there?
Well, 300 Bear Cove Road, that decision has been made, it's over with. The developer presumably will develop in the fashion that he had proposed.
And when does that start?
I have no idea, that's up to the developer.
If it goes in the past 2 years, we have to reapply.
I don't know how long, is it 2 years?
I think it's one, actually.
1 year? Okay.
Is an environmental impact report part of the approval process at all?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Is an environmental impact report part of the approval process at all?
No.
Why not?
Well, it's not, that's state law, that's not.
I mean,
that's
No,
not-
seriously,
is that
why not? Why not?
Right.
I mean, just educate me, but I guess I'm trying to understand.
We're very, obviously, we're not a very large community, a municipality. If they comply with the, and proposed developments within a particular zoning, then they have to comply with other state laws with regard to the environmental impact, not necessarily by way of a report. But just like Eric mentioned, stormwater runoff, proper silting, proper permits for the grading, things of this nature. That's not us, that's the county that would do that. So we have state, county, and other regulators that control things like that. As far as an environmental impact report, there's no requirement for that.
So in the town of Woodfin's approval process, there's not, so the environmental component is kind of being offloaded to either like county or to the state authorities for this? I guess, like, is there no environmental component at all in terms of what gets approved?
Sure.
From this council?
You mean by the council?
Yeah, I was curious about what that procedure is,
Well, I'm not,
or if that will be written into the changes that you're
I have
talking
no
about.
idea.
The changes you made permit that to occur, that discussion to occur. Is that fair?
There's site analysis that's required, and stormwater is a big thing that has to be addressed. But as far as an environmental impact document, we're not gonna require that.
Why not? If you have the power to do it and it's relevant in these times, you talk about the ordinances being outdated based on circumstances, these circumstances in this time.
She already decided before public input?
I mean, there's a lot of people that might feel differently.
We had public input sessions for the changes that were made. I mean, we had meetings where that was heard and you had the opportunity to come voice your opinion.
You did not open it up for
Since
public
January?
comment during COVID in May. and
Oh, I'm
June, you
sorry.
did not open it up for public comment. Yeah.
Well, it was on Zoom, I'm sorry.
I just have to say that this is supposed to be a living document that's going to be developed during the process. To give the power to one man like the fire chief, I have no idea what the fire chief is, or who he will be. But to give that to one man is a grave mistake. It has to be more than one person who's making that decision.
quick question. Is there any consideration for the studies that are done on traffic and other impacts? I know currently that the developers fund those studies. Is there any consideration making them independent, or maybe there's a half and half, so there's not a slant for who's providing those studies?
There is a traffic impact study requirement for Mountain Village District in the new ordinance going forward.
Pay for that
Yeah.
study? Is there any, are you thinking of changing that to where it's more independent? For example, in the Bear Cove Road study on traffic, the traffic guy, that was an ex-NDOT employee, didn't take into account over 100 unused lots of Versant and Bertana that would add to the traffic. So that was in his calculations of traffic.
There wasn't one required for Bear Cove Road, was there?
That was before my time.
It was a traffic report, but it.
There was, but I'm not sure if it was, I can't remember.
I don't think so.
Whether it was
Just
required.
curious if there's any consideration of making it a joint effort instead of allowing the developer.
I propose that. I was here when we discussed the Reed Creek development of 200 units, and the state traffic person did not have any interest, any information, absolutely disregarded Jonestown Road. He acted like all of the cars were going to go on Elk Mountain Road. I'm going, give me a break. We already have way too many cars. What is Woodfin doing to improve the road, to have curbs, to have a safe road in our midst? Instead, we're finding out that a developer can say, oh, the state engineer came and he said it was going to be just fine and dandy. And that made me very suspicious of what's going on in our government. And I think one thing that you all need to do above all is to convince your constituents that you are practicing good government. Because when things happen in a meeting that you didn't foresee, or that looks shady, or that make you all go, why is this happening? This is wrong, this shouldn't happen. What's going to happen in the whole district? We're going to all be losing out because of poor leadership and not much effort to think in advance. I think Woodfin is a sitting duck. I think every development that would like to go in Asheville, and if they can't, they'll come here instead. Are we ready? Do we have a clue what we need to prepare for with our legal minds, with our studies of other states, other principalities? This is not new. This has happened throughout the 20th century in our country, that you have beautiful scenery, and the developers go, oh boy, let me put a highway here. And of course, it's disastrous. It ruins the scenery. What about the wildlife? What about us all having bears in our yards this year because they have nowhere else to be? That's the process that is happening. It's inexorable, but we gotta be ready for it and have a plan and know how to tell the constituents, those of us sitting out here, we thought of that. Yeah, this is what we're gonna do about that. And instead, you know, I feel for Adrienne because I know she's come at this late in the game, but all of you have a responsibility to be ready to say, that's what I think we need to work on. And each of you take a piece of this and start to fix it. It can be overwhelming, but there doesn't have to be a future that has Woodfin looking like Henderson County or looking like Asheville or looking like Charlotte. I love that Charlotte Street, not Charlotte, that says it. That's what we want here. I look out at these gorgeous old oak and elm trees and feed the birds and absolutely adore Jonestown Road. What's to prevent 20 more houses put in on Jonestown Road? There has to be some limitation. And what would have happened if they'd done Reed Creek? And I don't even know what finally happened with that. So far, I haven't seen that development, but please find a way to convince the rest of us that you've figured out a strategy of what to do going forward.
I think first step in that is what Adrian's doing. Particularly on Mountain Village. Michael, is Michael in the room? Michael, can you get everybody here a copy of all the different regulatory agencies that have to be involved in anything like the Bluffs are handled?
Okay.
Just so everybody would have a copy, because I think that kind of helps for you all to see what has to happen before any development really happens there. Okay, it's a good comprehensive list. I think it'll make you all feel better about it.
Well, I'm an alternate on the planning board, so I've been getting some of these documents, and I am overwhelmed with all of the facts and figures.
Yeah.
But what is needed is to have a team in place that can compete on a level playing field with these high-paid attorneys that spend months coming up with all the right attacks,
Well, now,
all the right things to do to catch us unaware, to make us be impossible to fight back. We've got to have our muscle.
and it's very overwhelming to the different committees to have those very, an attorney at every one of our, the zoning meeting?
Working on it.
Okay, yeah. So we're going to have a town attorney there to represent Woodfin at all those meetings. And I think that's something that we didn't really feel like we needed before, but we definitely know we need it now. So we are trying to make the changes. We really do. We feel the same way you all do. We do feel like Woodfin is very special, and almost everybody up here grew up here. So we don't want it ruined either. But I would like for you all to have a list of all those permits and regulatory, so you see all the different steps, that it isn't like you just come up and tell Eric you're gonna build this development and we lay down and say, go for it. It isn't like that at all. So I think that at least will help you see that. And then we're making notes. These changes are not completed. I think you said that a couple of times. I'm making very good notes about what you're unhappy about, and we'll definitely look at that. But she chose Mountain Village because that is the zoning area that left us mostly open to very large developments coming in, and being able to say, well, the zoning says this much, so as long as I can do this many, then we really didn't have much to say. She's trying to make the whole process more transparent so that neighbors and commissioners and public in general can really look at each development. Tell me if I'm wrong here. And if they know that that's too many people, that it's going to ruin this side of the road or whatever, there'll be time for input, and it'll be included. It isn't going to just be a deal that the developer comes in with their attorneys, and because it's written here, we don't have any choice. So I do believe what she's doing is going to help us in the long run. So we are in the process of that. And we took the one that we felt was the weakest, and we're hitting that one first.
Any effort to look at the current parcels that are still in Mountain Village and going to those owners, and there probably wouldn't be many cases where they would agree to rezone their property, but there might be some to limit that development?
You never know. You never know. I think the lady that said right there, it's all about money, that's really the truth.
Is there any effort to address and go to those individuals whose partially owned parcels that are currently zoned Mountain Village and say, hey, would you agree to have your property rezoned, so we could prevent that potential action from happening in those cases? Is that a viable thing, or is that just not thinking?
I don't think it hurts to ask, but off the top of my head, I'm thinking they've probably already got their plans and their funding, and they need a certain percentage in order to make their profit. It's all a process.
I think it goes back to the comprehensive plan needing to be addressed so we can know which direction the town wants to head, and then we can have those conversations with property owners. But until we know what that direction is, I don't know what I would go ask them to rezone to.
Yeah.
Just wondering if those changes and all the stuff on
Yes, I can answer that one. We put it together for that, but it would apply for anyone now. Yeah.
Does that mean the plan that he submits for approval will have to be more comprehensive before approval? Process. Does that seem to be the delay in his approval with that conditional use regarding height and then health and welfare? Now, those things are both gone, so does he need a comprehensive plan with all the site, stormwater, et cetera, before he can be approved now?
There's permit choice rights by state statute, so he can choose which version of the ordinance he falls under.
Interesting.
After that, and so we don't know which direction he's heading yet. I'm still waiting to hear back from his council.
What is he going to have before he gets sewer permitting and water permitting? Not just approval from Woodfin on height. What else does he have to have?
That's, Michael's getting that list for them, but
That's what I'm saying is.
It's a long list.
This is one step.
Right.
Those site plans, under the old rules, that's all Woodfin would be doing. Under the new rules, there's more to it that we're doing. But he still would have to go through MSD and have to say, this is how many units, this is how we're doing, this is how it's laid out. The stormwater approvals, all those things have to occur. It's a multi-step process.
Before he can break ground and start excavating?
Before he gets permits, he can't get his permits until he has these things checked off. And that's what we've got, a document that we put together to talk about that. And quite honestly, we've all been very pissed that we couldn't talk about this, and we still shouldn't be talking about it. Damn it, the law was not permissible. We were not permitted to talk about it. I am just sick and tired of the topic because we can't talk about it. I'm burning up. Honestly, the law is not written to permit us to talk about it because of the process that was in place. So she's fixed the process. I'm just tired. And I agree with these people agree with a lot of what you're saying. I've talked with them. They agree with a lot of what you're saying.
We're just driving down Riverside Drive today, you know how the water is. Just when you come off Jonestown Road, it's so high that I can't even imagine the millions of gallons of water that would inundate the river if this were to happen.
Can we just be honest?
The flooding on Riverside
Can we be
Drive.
honest about it? We all live in houses that were built on land that was previously, at one point, virgin land.
Right.
So none of us are innocent. And I'm just kind of like tired of taking rocks about this. We're trying to make it better.
1,400 units is the biggest project by far.
It would double your
And you may
valuation.
never come before a year.
It all adds up. It's all incremental. It's all incremental.
Wow, that's a problem.
It's all incremental.
260 units in Hardin and 10 buildings on the size of one building.
I'm not saying that I favor or disfavor what this project is. I have to be agnostic about it. Right in the middle. Doesn't really matter to me. But we all live on land that was previously virgin land.
Sure, but there's zoning and things in place that are practicality
Yeah,
and
question.
appropriateness of development.
As I said in a letter to the developer when he was throwing that at us as well, what we can learn from that is that once you take down a forest, the forest is gone. There's no going back.
This is useful for this board to make decisions and give direction.
Especially in proximity to the river.
I think I speak for a lot of people who say, we're glad to at least hear what you said tonight and to know that we have been heard and that there are a lot of steps, a lot of safeguards. We also do understand that the bridge can be a requirement and that it's up to the commissioners. That's your decision. And we already know that the traffic, it's too much traffic for Richmond Hill Drive. We already know that. We've done our studies. And we live there. So we know that you need to make the bridge a requirement. So we're throwing that out as a final thing.
I will tell you that stating opinion as fact is part of the problem that you all face. Because that's a lot of the emails that I read is opinion stated as fact.
Yeah,
And it's
well,
factually
you know,
incorrect.
We're going to have experts that will be able to testify.
Have you ever even scheduled a meeting with her to talk about the issues? I mean, no one talks to us about it. There's just conjecture in the air. And who does that help? Absolutely no, it doesn't help you. It makes you look ridiculous.
But we have stormwater and traffic.
And we're all on the same
Concern-
side of this
Our
matter.
concern is that we will never get the opportunity to present any testimony the way it's going.
Well,
The changes in the height requirements.
so she's fixed that. She's
zoning
fixing that.
requirements. Actually, we think it fixes it the other way for the development.
So this is,
So we'll spend a lot of time and money, and we'll never be able to get it out in public. Some expert testimony to contradict his traffic studies and his stormwater or anything else. Where are we gonna be able to present expert testimony?
the bluffs is not something that we can undo what has been done. We're trying to fix the next situation, and that's the best we can do today. The law just doesn't permit that much latitude for the one that you're talking about, for the one that concerns you individually. I see that you don't believe me. Show me.
We were told that it was.
Well, you were told wrong. That is a state decision. Only the state and the Corps of Engineers.
I appreciate that. I'll check my notes
What was
and
the
see who told me that.
There was no question, I was just stating that we have no control over the bridge, if any, that goes across the French John River. That is a state decision and or the state DOT and or Corps of Engineers. I don't frankly know who's got,
But you can't require that he pursue that permitting in conjunction with his desired proposal. You as a committee cannot require that he get that permitting process in place before continuing forward with the bluff.
I'm not gonna speak about that because I don't wanna talk about an ongoing development right now.
We're really not
I just wanna
supposed
tell you
to.
that we don't say, yes, you can build a bridge or no, you can't.
Right, we understand that. We understand where the Army Corps of Engineers and all that.
All that.
Right, I was saying that we were told that the commissioners can make it a requirement, that he be approved.
Again, I don't wanna speak on ongoing project.
I appreciate it.
Just as a general rule, having moved here about 7 years ago and walking my dog all the time in the River Mart, Woodland Park, I believe from my observation, there's been about 15 yards, maybe 20, maybe 30, of river side that has fallen into the river. Lots of trees have gone down. It's right by the sidewalk now. And it used to be people were out there fishing and camping, right, you know, it was a lot of land. Who is responsible for raising a ruckus about erosion, for, you know, the loss of property?
Are you talking about a Riverside Park?
Yeah.
That is in phase 2 of the Riverside Park redevelopment.
Yeah, but
Equinox
I'm
is,
talking about
oh.
as a governing body.
You
that
mean
is responsible for owning all of the land.
the banks
and
of the French?
wildlife and everything else here. Where does a citizen turn to say, what are we doing about that? And of course, it's a bigger issue. It has to do with higher water, flooding, stormwater runoff, inappropriate in other places.
I don't think,
down the river.
I don't think we're really allowed to do much about,
The attitude.
no, I'm talking, no, the Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for being,
Okay, but
okay.
you can't shrug it off and say, oh, well, there's some governmental entity that's supposed to fix it. You need to raise a ruckus. And all of the nature conservancies and land conservancies and Sierra clubs and all of these organizations that are committed to the environment, they need to be given a chance to get involved with who is advocating for the river.
Well,
For everybody that uses it for recreation, for all the tourism money that we get for the river, who's standing up for these trees that are being washed away? Who's to blame? Who's being responsible for that? And all of us who live there see these things. And we're going, well, what does Woodfin do about it? I do with Woodfins, isn't it?
I think
wonder
it is,
how they feel.
I think it is the Army Corps of Engineers, because I know you're really not supposed to do much to riverbanks. It's really, you're not supposed to. So, I mean, you can be, you know, you just can't go in and change the riverbank up here to try to protect this, because down here,
I'm not
Okay.
suggesting that we go build a concrete wall to protect our
Okay.
riverbank. I'm saying we pass the buck. We say, what can we do about that? That belongs to the Army of Engineers. And when we have other environmental issues that are getting worse and worse and worse and worse, whether it's Charlotte Street or any other battle, it doesn't have to be in Woodfin per se.
Right.
But each municipality ought to be talking with the others in our region about a regional problem that is truly killing us. And one of the things we got to do is say, we cannot allow this rampant development. It's only putting money in the pockets of those that are developing it. It's not helping the quality of life for our children, for our pets, for our scenery, for our livelihood, for the tourism trade, for all of the things that affect our lives in this part of Virginia,
North Carolina.
Virginia.
I do know in Riverside Park, they are addressing because we do have trees that fall into the river there. It's been a problem. So phase 2, they've come up with a way to move water around or something, and I think that's gonna help.
Do you know if they're addressing traffic issues that are probably gonna happen with Riverside?
We are trying. We talk about that. We're trying. That is a state-maintained road, correct? So we're really not allowed to put speed bumps. We can ask. That does not mean that,
Flashing lights, they can't do that either.
I don't know about flashing. We have to get,
Do you actually ask? Because I came in here a couple of years ago citing information about the traffic and the population growth on Weaverville Road. And the last time that Weaverville Road was assessed for traffic safety was 1986.
that's a state-maintained.
State road, man.
State-maintained.
You guys should be aware of that.
You can do just as much as we can.
Yeah, it isn't that we're not aware of it. It's just
Call
that we don't have any.
DOT, put the pressure on them. We try.
Yeah.
That's, I guess, what I'm asking is the effort being put,
How
our
do you
concerns
put
go to you,
pressure on
do they
them?
go forward to the other communities?
You find out who's on the board in your area and you call them up and then you just keep calling. That's really all we can do. I mean, that's just the way the system's set up. We're concerned about parking too on Riverside. We're very concerned about that. You all have been there, I think, during events and people will park on both sides of the road. We're trying very hard to get some parking solutions before any of these parks are really open. So we are working on that.
Another question about like where the line is and what the town of Woodfin can and cannot do and can and cannot control in this. In terms of the bluffs or any like hypothetical, right? Like that one's in the works, right? In a hypothetical development down the line, does the town of Woodfin have the power to mandate that X amount of those units are affordable housing? I mean, because I see we have a balance of growth, right? Like we are trying to preserve nature, but we also know that like people are coming to this area like specifically for climate change. So we are going to have to manage an influx of people, right? But what's the balance? Like, and we know that there is a shortage of affordable housing in the area. What is this a town of Woodfin thing that y'all are able to put a stipulation on any type of new development, or you have to reserve this for low-income residents?
I know they are doing that in Asheville. I mean, I'm sure you all have seen that. We really haven't started that here, but I think that comprehensive plan that she mentioned, when she is going to be getting public input, very good topic to bring in. We all have to remember, though, when you own a piece of property, it is your piece of property. I mean, it's yours. And people don't just come to us and ask permission if they can sell that piece of property. And it isn't like they don't know that they can't donate property, to an organization where it will stay natural. It isn't that they're not aware of those things. We try to give everybody all that information, but that doesn't mean that people haven't held a piece of property for years and years and they want to make a profit on it. So we don't have any control over who people sell to and what the plans are. I mean, we are limited in that. And if you owned the piece of property, you wouldn't want us to have that much control over you either. So.
If there was a big development,
I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
If there was a big development like the Bluffs, surely there's room for leverage, which sounds like what they're doing in Asheville. The fact of the matter is, over there in Richmond Hill, lots of people are losing. They're losing their homes.
Are they?
The financial situation is grim. So isn't there a possibility for Woodfin to be able to say, within the parameters of you putting this big thing in, that we have to consider the people who are being displaced?
Well, I think it's a great idea, and like I said, they are doing it in other places, and I think we should definitely look at it. So,
You as a body have control over the density, don't you? Of,
the zoning,
well, that's what you
That's-
have, that's what you have to do.
and that's the reason we're looking at the Mountain Village first, because that's the one where we've left ourselves most open to being out of control. So,
At the one at 300?
no, I'm talking about just, that's what Adrian is changing right now. That's brought you all in over the hype. She's changed it to try to make it more transparent so that we won't have a developer come in and be able to basically have a high density without talking to anybody. That it's just, the rule is this, their attorneys say that, we don't have any choice. That's what the whole emphasis of this discussion has been about, is we chose Mountain Village first because that has the highest density. That's the one that can do the most damage.
So what I'm hearing is you guys are upset that we didn't have to get as many plans and such like that, but the one weird thing that you had in
Upset.
your zoning was the height requirement. It may not have made sense, but we went ahead and removed it while we're in the middle of the approval process, so that they may not have to come back to a public meeting at all.
That isn't,
They'll still have to come back to a public meeting no matter which ordinance they fall under. It just depends on what the approval process is. Is it gonna be quasi-judicial or legislative?
Legislative, more open, this body, quasi-judicial, Board of Adjustment.
Board of Adjustment versus Board of Commissioners.
So they won't have to, they can't try to do by right?
No. By right still means they have to get approval by the board. It just means they don't have to go through the quasi-judicial process. They have to go through a different board,
So they go
Board of Commissioners,
This board instead of the. Okay. So we would have
based on the Mountain Village zoning district language.
and Michael's gonna get you that form with all the different steps they have to take.
And he's gonna put it on the website.
He's gonna do the web, okay,
He's gonna put it on
that's
the
fine.
website. So check our website in the next,
Tomorrow.
by tomorrow maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hang on,
Thank you guys, thank you guys for
Yeah.
that information.
We want you to, we're all on the same page here, okay? We really are,
I
so.
know it's been
And
so hard during COVID because we've been.
Yes.
with no opportunity to do this.
Well, and I'm just thrilled, and I hope we're not gonna have to go back to wearing masks, but I mean, it's hard to sit up here for 3 hours and 4 hours with the mask on too, I'll just tell you. So, yeah.
Okay, moving on to,
Yeah.
I think the lady from the second row wore glasses and was throwing something against me and Debbie. Second row here on the right, blue blouse.
Yeah.
okay, moving on to new business. First item is, ABC Board Monthly Report.
Good evening. So, I'm Ms. Tager. It's nice to be here, and I get to be here for the meetings for the next year.
Congratulations, we're glad to have you.
Well, thanks, I think. So I don't know exactly, I asked Tom Spradling what he usually reported, and so I think that he usually reports what we have in the bank and what our situation has been for the month. And I will say, we have been down, we're down 23% this month in sales, but we didn't really know what was going to happen with the pandemic because we've all heard the stories about how the rates of alcoholism and drinking went up, and it seems that when everything closed down, people started drinking more at home, and that was a benefit to our business. And now that things are opening back up, it's not beneficial to our business, but hopefully it is to the public as a whole. But in looking at the state percentages, one thing I noticed is that other areas of the state sales has not continued to be as depressed as ours, but that's because their mixed beverage sales have gone up because their bars and restaurants have opened up. And unfortunately, in Woodfin, we don't have a lot of bars and restaurants, so it has not brought our mixed beverage sales up. So I'm hoping that as we do bring more businesses in, and restaurants, and the Village Porch is open now, which is helpful, and they have become a good customer and are buying from us. And apparently he wants to open another restaurant in the Reynolds Mountain area when he can, that's more of a higher end restaurant. So we're hoping that those kinds of things will help with our mixed beverage sales. But and so one thing that I did do, or what I've suggested, is that we start just not looking at our numbers on a monthly comparison to 20, but also to look back at 19, because we realize that the circumstances that we're in now are more similar to 2019 than they are to where we were at 2020 when everything was shut down. So we were down 23% for the month. That was our change from June of 2020. Our sales for the month were 210,884 was our total sales. And our total sales for the month of June in 2019 were 156,242. So we were up 35% from what we were in June of 2019. So, I will like to continue with this balanced look of, okay, let's be real, where were we last year, and then let's also look at where we were in 2019. And I feel it's a positive thing to say that we were up 35% over where we were in 2019. And then the year-to-date, we are up for our year-to-date P&L from July 20 to June 2021. We're still at a 3% increase, so from year-to-date, we're not at a loss. We're almost at a break-even point, so we feel pretty good about that. And then, let's see. Our total assets in the bank. Okay, so we have $248,679.16 in our First Horizon account. So we have plenty of money in case of I don't know what. And then we also have our construction account that has about $350,000 in it. We're a little confused or concerned because we haven't been billed anything by construction. And if you've driven by the store, you know that construction has been underway for several months now. I think Tammy said the jackhammer by the back door has subsided, so she's grateful for that. I think it will begin again at some point, but we have not yet been billed anything. So we are requesting from the construction company that we be billed monthly with an itemized report, so we know because clearly they're spending money that they're going to ask us to pay for, but we don't know what that is. So we're trying to ask for a little more clarity in what's happening in the construction process and what costs we are incurring because of that. So do you guys have more questions, specific questions?
No. When Don Hensley gets back, he's the one.
Well, that's what I
He'll
heard.
ask you a lot of questions.
That's what I
We're
heard.
the easy ones here, so.
Okay. All right, great. Well, please feel free to reach out if you need to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next two items on the agenda is gonna be handled by our police chief, so Chief.
All right, good evening. As the mayor said, I'm here to present two items today. For the first one is the recognition of Detective Christopher Morrow for completion of the North Carolina Justice Academy Criminal Investigation Certificate Program. Unfortunately, Detective Morrow left this afternoon. He wasn't feeling well. He wasn't looking well, so we went ahead and sent him home. But I did want to kind of extol my pride in him for completing this program. We call it the CICP certificate. is it's not an easy course. It's over 400 hours of training, which includes some mandatory classes such as interview and interrogation, basic criminal investigations, and then he still has to have another, it's almost 300 hours, 280 hours of additional training besides what they require for the course completion. So he worked hard on this. This is the type of training that is what we would expect for a professional officer to attain, and he did that well. So I want to congratulate him in receiving that award. He's actually already received his plaque from the state. They sent that to him already, so I just want to say a big congratulations to him. All right. Moving on to the second item, this is the presentation of the Life-Saving Award to Detective Jason Gregg. Detective Gregg, come on in. This is regarding an incident that happened on June 15th of this year. I was not on scene for this. Actually, that was actually the day of our last board meeting, and didn't hear about this until after our meeting. Had I known at the time, I probably would have told you the story then. But as it stands, I'll tell it now. So I will give the presentation that I have here. This is on June 15th, 2021 at approximately 5 o'clock p.m. Officers of the Woodfin Police Department received a call of an unresponsive person in the parking lot of 10 Newbridge Apartments. Upon their arrival, a male subject was found lying in the parking lot. Officers quickly made the determination that the subject in question was suffering from an opiate overdose. Detective Gregg immediately began life-saving measures for the individual. He ran to his vehicle and retrieved his department-issued naloxone, commonly referred to as Narcan. Detective Gregg issued a first dose in accordance to a training and policy, but with no effect. However, he was not deterred. He ran back to his vehicle to retrieve a second dose of Narcan, which he then administered. Officer Gregg refused to give up on a human life and encouraged the subject to wake up and stay awake, shaking him and yelling at him to wake up. Before medics arrived on the scene, Detective Gregg had the subject alert and responsive. Other officers who were on the scene were convinced that had Detective Gregg not interceded, this man would have died. Detective Gregg's determination and selflessness are qualities that are desired in every law enforcement officer. Also, his quick thinking and response to training were evident in this incident, which led to a successful outcome. I'm extremely proud to call Detective Jason Gregg one of our own. This time, it is with great pleasure I present to Detective Jason Gregg this Woodfin Police Department Life-Saving Award and pin. Congratulations. Very proud of you.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a public hearing on a rezoning application for property located at 810 Elk Mountain Scenic Highway. Adrian?
So this is the voluntary non-contiguous annexation that you guys voted on in March for Sourwood Inn. So we need to zone it. It's currently under Buncombe County zoning designation. So it's kind of a weird site based on the designations we have in our ordinance now. So they are requesting to go under R43, which is low density residential conditional zoning, and to be zoned as that. So it allows them to maintain the current use of the property and to carry out future plans they may have through that comprehensive review of process that we talked about earlier. The planning board reviewed this and they recommend approval. There's a written statement from them in your packet, as well as a consistency statement that you'll need to adopt if you decide to approve it. They're here if you have any questions for them about the rezoning or why they're requesting what they're requesting.
We're just glad we've got it done finally. This has been a long time coming.
Yeah.
Okay, before I open this public hearing, are you Mr. Perry? Talked to you on the phone several times, but I never had the opportunity. Incidentally, that's a good place to eat.
Yes, it is.
Okay, without any further comments, I'll open this public hearing. Does anyone wish to speak to this zoning? Ask again, does have any comments regarding this zoning? Last call. Anyone have any comment? Okay, hearing none, I'll close this public hearing at 7:47. And with that, do we have a motion to proceed with zoning this property as, what'd you say that was?
R43 conditional zoning.
R43?
CZ for short.
Make a motion?
Have a motion, have a second?
Second.
Any discussion from the board? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, congratulations. Next item, Mr. Hardy, amendment to the pay and classification schedule.
You'll recall that as part of the adoption of the 2021 budget, 2021-22 budget, you all also approved a pay and classification plan, which had a schedule in it, schedule of all the town's positions. One of the things that I think this board has recognized and asked staff to do was to recruit for a project manager. The town has undertaken a major parks project along the river and on Beaver Dam Creek. You also know that with the adoption of the budget and discussions and workshops leading up to that, we know that there's a lot of storm drain improvements that will be bearing down on the town. We'll report later about the preliminary work that's being done on that to plan out those improvements. And the town doesn't have a formal plan of how we're going to replace and manage our assets, whether that be rolling stock or facilities. So there's a need for someone to do that work. And so up to this point in time, the existing staff has absorbed those duties and responsibilities, but obviously the town is growing and the scope of our work is expanding as well. And so we have begun recruiting for a project facilities manager in order to classify that position and set a salary range. I worked with the finance director who did some research, looked at comparable positions in other local governments nearby for those that were comparable that we could glean information from. We looked at the level of responsibility, the consequence of error, went into the determination about where that position should be classified. And where we landed was on this slide here. So we've slotted in that project and facilities manager at a grade 32. The action for the board is to amend this classification schedule to include that actual position. So what we're doing right now is we're recruiting, and we've advertised, we've opened it up, and we're accepting applications currently, and we will through the end of this month, or the 28th of this month. We're expecting a hiring salary of between $75,000 and $80,000, and with benefits, that total cost will be an increase to the budget of $112,000, and that's a recurring increase year over year. And what we do also anticipate is that with the American Rescue Plan funds that have recently been made available to the town and to all local governments and state governments, that stormwater management is an eligible use of those funds. And so for someone to oversee the development and investment in that infrastructure, we would propose that 25% of that person's time then will be dedicated to those activities. That would be a potential way of funding this particular position so that the general fund impact would be, at least in this current year, if it were looking at a full year, would be $84,000 and some change. And so that's what we're asking for, is an amendment to this schedule to add that position in.
Any questions for Eric? Okay, you've heard the recommendation. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Eric, resolution establishing procedures for handling of closed session minutes.
So closed session items and topics that you all discussed are governed by law. There are certain reasons why you go into closed session and you discuss certain things. Minutes are kept of those records. We don't have a specified or explicit procedure for how those are handled. And the way that that works is there's a point in time when those closed session items are no longer necessary to be kept closed and confidential. And so what this policy and this procedure does is it establishes a review process that periodically, I think it's semi-annual, in the procedures, that you all will review those, or the mayor will review, and then make a motion to unseal certain records that were part of closed session minutes. So what this action does is it approves that policy and that practice.
Any questions for Eric? Have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and one more, Eric, resolution making available early voting site.
Yeah.
The state requires that the Board of Elections of Buncombe County and all counties in North Carolina have make available open early voting. It does not require that the town, for a municipal election, make that available. What we're asking for here is approval to make that available, and there's a cost that's associated with that. The town has budgeted $13,000 for election expenses. That amount is based on 2019 cost. In talking with Board of Elections, we expect that that would be about what that is. The incremental cost per day to add another day of early voting is about $500, $600. And so what we're proposing is, in the actual recommendation, is up to 2 days of early voting, making that available to voters in Woodfin at the community center as a voting site. The Sunday before, the Sunday, October 20th, a week and a half before Election Day, as well as Saturday before the general election date. What has to happen is, for any alternate early voting sites, for example, Weaverville also has a municipal election, they may designate a site and a date. That date has to be consistent across all of those jurisdictions, so we'll have to match theirs or they match ours. And talking with the town manager in Weaverville, I believe she's going to recommend at their town council meeting next week, the Saturday before early voting. So most likely, the result of this action, if you decide to approve, that would be early voting available at the community center on the Saturday before Election Day. Now, Woodfin voters can vote downtown at 50 Cox, the central Buncombe County Board of Elections site, any of those 10 days prior to, it's Monday through Friday, before the general election. But this would just be offering one additional site on a weekend. And so that's what this recommendation is. And that has to be approved by this board, and then should you approve that, then we will notify the Board of Elections, and then they will take it from there.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board?
Definitely more convenient.
Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to departmental and administrators' reports. First one is the police report, Chief.
Well, good evening again. Seems like it's so long since I've spoken with you. Of course, we have our total sheet out here in front of you. As you can see, our total dispatched events were slightly down, significantly down, about 100 events from this time in 2020. However, you notice our citations issued were up, as were our felony drugs as well as misdemeanor drugs. And our driving while impaired, we had one less. Notably, our crash reports are down, and I don't want to jinx anything, but we are trending down for the year, and that is a good thing for us. That was in June, so we can see that one. Investigations took on 6 new cases, which those included a hit-and-run case, an unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, and a larceny of a motor vehicle. I'm still looking. Larceny of a motorcycle that occurred. And I believe those cases are still pending. And so that's kind of the quick stats for our reports. The highlights that I want to give for this month are, one, our new patrol officer, Donnie Ross, who started with us. Her paperwork has been sent off to the state. We hope to have something back early this week to get her sworn and out on the roadway. So that got us to our full complement of officers. However, our evidence custodian submitted his letter of resignation. He's going to take a job with the feds. He's going to go and work special police with the military, I think, with the Air Force in a civilian position instead of joining up with the Air Force there, which means we have an opening for an evidence custodian. We've posted that and had that open for 2 weeks. As of today, we had about 140 candidates. So people want to be an evidence custodian, but they don't want to be a police officer. It is our hope to start whittling that number down and conducting interviews within the next couple of weeks and making that change happen. Something else. Those are really the big ones. That's the, again, our personnel issues. We're thankful for the board for getting us to where we are. And we're just kind of plugging along. Any questions?
I got one, Chief. I know we had a substantial break in the entering July the 4th on Riverside Drive, and I was just wondering, any leads on that or anything? At Walter's Grocery.
Oh, that one. At this point, no. Yeah.
As you know, we're friends.
Right. It'd been
You're a person of interest.
it'd been about 20 years since Waldrop's had been hit, because that's when he put the bars on the windows. But someone managed to actually get in that, and it was done in a manner that our night shift didn't see it, and when our day shift went down, they didn't see it at first either.
Right.
So it was, kind of a concealed crime. But they are working that one diligently and trying to find some information.
I was just curious.
Unfortunately, we don't have any surveillance from the area at the time, and so it's making things a little harder. Any other questions?
Are you seeing much gang activity in Woodfin now?
Well, again, let me knock on the wood here. No, is the short answer. We do know that there are some gang members who travel through Woodfin, being on the edge of Asheville, which does have a growing gang issue. It's inevitable that they will make their way to Woodfin. And we know that there have been, in the past, incidents that have occurred even in Madison County involving gangs up in Mars Hill. We have been, and actually we have had some runoff from that as well. We believe that our firearm discharge case that we had a couple months ago was somewhat gang-related. But as for gang members who are living within the town, gang crime which is occurring in the town, we've not seen a significant uptick at all. In fact, we've seen hardly any.
That's good.
All right. Anything else? All right, thank y'all.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Planning and zoning.
Seems like you were just up there. Yeah.
So I wanted to let you know we have the kickoff meeting for the stormwater system inventory on Thursday. So I think Landis-Sky's going to be getting started on that hopefully next week.
So they have listed all of our creeks.
No,
No.
just starting.
Just starting?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're gonna, that's part of what they're going to do, is list every creek, every body of water in Woodfin.
Every catch basin and drain and
That's
storm
huge.
water infrastructure related item.
Very good.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that our new plan is to start on a comprehensive plan, and so we're working on how what that's gonna mean. I've talked to Gerald Green, actually, that you worked with before. I think he might have done the
Yeah.
comprehensive plan we have now. And so I'm trying to figure out what the options are for that, so I'll likely be coming back to you next month with that plan. Staff's been working with the software that was allowed this fiscal year for permitting and inspections, and we've been working on that once a week with a trainer, and we have some things to do on our end, but we're hoping to go live with that in August. And then I just wanted to let you know about the Planning Board and Board of Adjustment meetings from last month. Board of Adjustment met on June 24th and approved 2 setback variances for 2 lots on 4th Street Extension and a special use permit for a small-scale brewery/training facility on Riverside Drive. And then the Planning Board met June, a couple weeks ago, and reviewed the rezoning for Sourwood Inn, but they also have started looking at the community shopping zoning district, because there's some confusing things in that district that need to be worked out. The designations aren't mapped out correctly, so we're trying to figure out how to clear that up. So they'll continue to work on that, hopefully bring something back in the next couple months on that. Good. That's all I have.
Finance.
Good evening. So in your package, you have our customary line item detail for June. I've summarized here showing where the net position for the fiscal year that ended June 30th, total revenue collected for this year was $5,205,850. We spent $4,348,128. That left us with a positive impact on fund balance, so in addition to fund balance of around $857,000. Now, those are unadjusted numbers. There are lots of accounting, year-end adjustments and accruals and entries that we're working on consistently. We hope to have all those in the next few months. Our auditors are scheduled to begin field work August 23rd, so about a month from now. So we're working to get all that done before their arrival. So these numbers are going to change slightly, but that gives you a good ballpark of where that we ended up the year in a very positive place. So I felt really good about that. This is a slide we've looked at a couple of times, showing you for the last 5 years the overall impact on fund balance for the year. Our policy that we put in place this year requires that we maintain between a 30 and 70% fund balance. So for the fiscal year 21's operating budget, we ended up at about a 69.3% fund balance, projected fund balance, pending adjustments. So that's a really strong, healthy place for the town to end the fiscal year. One of the main drivers for that, as you're aware, was our very healthy sales tax revenue for this year. We came in about double what was projected originally. Ended up at $1.2 million in sales tax revenue. So I thought I'd throw that graph in there. And
thank goodness.
One, like my fancy thing. So one other, I stole that from the guy at Lambda Sky. One other thing that especially Commissioner Hensley likes to see is what our cash position is. So these are all of the town's bank accounts. We maintain operating accounts at First Horizon Bank here locally. At the end of June, our operating account held about $642,000. We have several other small accounts restricted for certain purposes, and then the majority of the town's cash flow is invested at the North Carolina Capital Management Trust. So they're in the business of investing government funds, and we can wire money back and forth as needed. That gave us an ending cash balance for the year of $5.4 million, almost $5.5 million. Any questions about finance? A couple of highlights on where we are. We implemented an electronic timekeeping system 2 weeks ago, completed our first pay period last week, and things went smoothly. So that's, we've moved away from the manual punch cards that have been in here for 50 years and gone to a more, employees can punch in on an app. There's geotechnology. Supervisors can approve time electronically so that, and then it comes to finance for processing. It's a lot more efficient, gives us more real-time data if we need to see employees' attendance records and things like that. Information will build over time and be available for supervisors. So I think that's a good step forward in that process. We also it allows us to enter our purchase orders that are required in government finance in the accounting system. That had been maintained manually outside the software system historically with the town. Now those POs are encumbered in the system. It'll show in your budget to actual support report starting next month. When you receive those, there'll be an additional column that shows purchase orders that are pending, and it backs out any of those obligations from the available budget in those reports, which helps finance folks like myself have a better idea of where we are without having to rely on outside spreadsheets for that information. So way better process, and I think the auditors will be really pleased to see that as well. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Okay, Eric, you win the rest of the prizes here.
So we'll talk about Public Works. You have your reports of the monthly activity from the Public Works Department. The only item that was rather notable that in talking with Public Works is that the volume of trash is increasing, but that's a seasonal increase, so nothing to be especially alarmed about, but it's higher than it has been, so these guys are working pretty hard. We did put onto our website and pushed out through social media a survey. One of the budget items for this year is the consideration of a rollout cart program for both trash and solid waste. So we wanted to get some feedback from the community as to whether or not that was desirable, what problems people might as of today, and so we'll continue to promote that. You can be very interested. One of the kind of a gift of having that information is hearing what people think about how we're providing services in the area of solid waste, and it's very, very positive, very favorable about Johnny and his crews. Very, very favorable. People commenting about how they live in other places, and it's so much more reliable here. So anyway, I know that's just a sampling, but it was very reassuring, and I shared that with him this morning. As Adrian mentioned, there's a joint effort between planning. Adrian is our stormwater administrator, but in the field work is Public Works, and so they're the ones who are responsible for replacing culverts and doing ditch work and various other storm drain issues and related matters. So as Adrian mentioned, the mapping and inventory of that system begins before the end of August. We have that kickoff meeting that Adrian mentioned next week. So we'll learn more about that. That was provided through a grant with our partnership with Land of Sky Regional Council. And so looking forward to seeing what the condition of our infrastructure is. Yeah. And because, as you know, as we've talked about, that's one of the looming dark clouds on the horizon for the town. How do we address that? There's more information here than you really need. What this is a detailed look at is the trucks that we use for Public Works and the various utilizations of those trucks. So things that are in red are what really matters. We have 2 trucks that are completely out of service. So the engines have blown. We're waiting for replacement on one. We had a decision point on the other whether or not to replace. Those 2 trucks one of which is what we use to collect leaves. So the vacuum, the leaf vacuum is attached to the trailer to the back of the truck, off it goes, and then the truck, just the vacuum then spits those leaves into the back of the truck. That engine is gone, and so the estimate to replace that on a 2008 truck was $17,000. Talked with Public Works, and what we're going to do instead is buy a box that fits into the dump truck body, so in the bed of the dump truck, so it'll still function. So we'll be just repurposing one of our trucks then to collect leaves, and so we'll retire that vehicle. We'll come back to you all next month with a request to surplus that vehicle. The other one we have used for snow removal, and we run 2 trucks during snow removal. One of them does the bulk of the work, but then the smaller one that we use goes up on the higher areas and more steep slopes. And so Sunny Ridge, up Leisure Mountain. So that particular truck it overheats when it runs, and so it's limping right now. We don't expect we're going to be able to use that this year, so that's a bit of a concern. We do have our big dump truck, which also has the plow package, so we can run one truck the majority of the time. So in talking with Public Works, we're looking at contractors with whom we can contract to provide that supplemental service to the town on demand as we need that too. So we're starting to work on that and anticipate what's coming this winter. We have 2 trucks on order that are waiting for microchips, and you probably have heard about that. That's all new vehicles, or many new vehicles are facing a shortage of those right now. They've been on order for months. Had those been ordered and delivered as normal, we would have no concerns about snow removal this winter or leaf collection, but there's a backlog on those, and we have no estimated time of arrival for those trucks. You all did approve it in the budget. The very last item on this list is the grappling truck, and so that now is on order. We are expecting that by November, so that will help us quite a bit with brush removal, and we can pick up and collect bigger pieces of trees and down trees. Entirely manual. We send out a crew, and 3 or 4 guys, they manually put all the leaves, all the branches in the back of a truck and take it off to the mulch yard. So this grappling truck will be a real boost. So thank you again for approving that purchase. Anything else on Public Works? I could spend all day on Public Works, but we did launch our website about a month ago, or in the last month, and that's going really well. I have to take my hat off to Ryan, who has taken to this like a fish to water. He's really good at managing that and keeping us current on things, and I'm really very appreciative of all the work that he's put into that and continues to oversee that. We talked about a project manager earlier tonight, and so that recruitment will end on July the 28th. We'll take a look to see, we've cast the net, see what we catch in that. We have about half a dozen folks who've expressed interest so far. So not 140 like some positions,
Right.
but still, we think it's a very important job. We'll talk about contracts and what contracts we've entered into in the last month in just a moment, as well as a proposed outline of what we think we might be able to use our American Rescue Plan Act funds for and toward. So the contracts that we've entered into since the last time we met, one of the things that the board also did this year with the adoption of the budget was step up significantly the investment in streets. And so we will be bidding out a package of about $1.5 million. We might blend that with next year's bid and make it even a larger package, maybe $2.5 million, to see what we can reasonably expect to pave with the money that has been provided and approved so far. In order to oversee that process, in the past, we've relied on Johnny to manage that work. He has perennially requested some help with that. That's not his area of expertise. He can identify the problems and he can fix things, and he is good at what he does. But this work is very specific, and if we want to have roads that we can maintain and that will not be in poor repair in 10 years, but really want 20 years out of these roads, we need to be very deliberate as to what we are actually getting and what we are actually, who's bidding on that. we talk about a contract that's over $500,000, it's a different process for bidding that, and that is very, very carefully prescribed by law. I've seen that go sideways and governments get in trouble. And so we want someone who does this for a living to do this. And so we've contracted with McGill Associates. They will be looking at the pavement condition survey that was completed, validating that, see does their scoring match that. Then they will say, this is what we estimate this will cost. If we have this much money, we can do this many streets. So they'll apply some of their knowledge to that. Come back to the board, we'll talk to you all about that at that point in time. Then the winter is the right time to put out a bidding, a contract, or a bidding proposal, or to request bids. Because right now is not the time, because the pavers have their schedules full. That's when we'll get the best pricing, and so we'll be ramping up, then entering into agreement, ideally, and then begin paving in the spring as soon as it gets warm enough that the asphalt plant's open. So that's what this is. Let's see, they will begin work, so they'll be on-site marking pavement that they say, working with Johnny, this is what we expect to pave this year. We'll mark that, then send out the contractors to take a look at that and submit their bids. So a lot of explanation for that, but that's got a big price tag on that, so I wanted to be very clear as to what the intent of that was. They will oversee the construction if we need them to, also, but that'll be a different contract. I think if we are able to find the right project manager, that project manager will help with that. Adrian mentioned iWork. iWork is a software application where we can track the number of permits that are applied for and who's gotten permits, so that we can track code enforcement and the violations that lead to those actions. That's what that particular software does for us right now. We have paper files, and trying to find something from 3 years ago is not really possible, so this will help improve that. We have entered into agreement with Land of Sky Regional Council. They provide geographic information services updates, so that's our zoning map. And one of the things that I think is a feather in our cap, we feel rather good about, I have to pat the planning staff on this, is our zoning map is now available through Buncombe County GIS. So we get calls often daily from realtors, someone's looking at this property, what is it zoned? Well, now that information is available through Buncombe County GIS. It's another layer in that. We are one of only 2 municipalities in the county that have that layer in Buncombe County GIS, the other being Asheville. So that's good company. That feels like a score and a win. We have an agreement for the mayor to sign now for legal services. We split the cost between Weaverville and Woodfin, and this is in relation to the consolidated 911 discussions that we're working on right now. Those are the contracts. It's the last time we met. I didn't mention that paving one we will pay for. We expect to pay for that through our PAL bill funds rather than general fund. So this is a lot of information on this slide too. I need to work on my delivery. There are one of the things that we've done as staff is, as well as soliciting ideas from you all, the town has been awarded $2.14 million as part of the American Rescue Plan Act. Those funds can be spent over the next 4 years, and as long as we're under contract, we would have an additional year to spend that, and so, or additional year and a half or so to spend that money. And so this is, at this point in time, based on the information that we have today, this is simply a proposed use, a plan. What we would like to do is review this with you. This will give Sherry then an idea how to construct a budget amendment or budget ordinance for you all next month. These are estimated costs. These are not firm costs, but this is the type of things that we believe are eligible under that act for expenditure, and that we believe would be meaningful for town operations and services to the community. The first, I can go through these. The first item on the list is the police department has got policies and procedures that are not current and all to current standards. A comprehensive look at that. Same thing is similar to what we're doing with our zoning ordinances, a comprehensive look top to bottom on that. This is a contract that is a company that provides this service. And so there is the Sheriff's Association Who has put together who has said this is an eligible expense at the supporting documentation?
So the company has provided the documentation showing where other agencies have used the ARPA funds for this, and they list the reasons how it fits into these spending categories.
All right, so we have something that, the burden is on the town, the recipient of these funds, to demonstrate and prove that that the uses are matching the eligible criteria, or eligibility criteria. And so we believe that fits there. And broadly speaking, there's 4 or 5 different categories of types of expenditures that are allowed, and we believe all of these fall within those. Victory Gardens, investments with in partnership with the elementary schools, with $10,000 in that for this fiscal year. The school systems also receive money. This is above and beyond that. Comprehensive plan, Adrian mentioned, and we've talked about that ad nauseum tonight about the comprehensive plan, is the foundational document from which many of our other planning documents, land use documents, operations, they stem from that. And so to have that updated from the 12, 13-year-old now document is essential. And so we know that you all are supportive of this, and we know that one of the categories for eligible usage is outreach in the form of equity. So making sure that we include voices in the decisions and in the input that goes to the comprehensive plan. So much of this is going to be involved in community outreach. And so what we're proposing here is, and Adrian will bring back a plan, $75,000 is a placeholder to contract with a company, Gerald Green and his cohort, that oversees the development of these plans, and they apply the best practices to that. There's that, but it's also to provide additional hands on deck here staff side. There's different levels of contracts that we could do for the comprehensive plan. Adrian's preference, and we support this, is for that to be done primarily through staff effort, because that's a good learning exercise for us. And so we do believe that a part-time person helping us with that would be appropriate and would be very, very valuable to the outcome of that. So again, tonight is not decisions, yes, no, up, down, vote. It's simply, this is what we're providing to you as context, like your feedback. We can adjust this around. We'll come back with a budget amendment, but that's not binding until we enter into agreements and we come back and report to you.
These are just your suggestions for right now.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am. One of the eligible uses is broadband, and because in North Carolina, municipalities are prohibited from investing in infrastructure to put, say, broadband for the entire town or parts of the town that don't have that, we can do on our own property. And so on town-owned properties, municipal properties, so what we're proposing is making broadband or Wi-Fi available in public parks, and simply estimating $50,000 per park. That's really high, and we know that's high, but we didn't know where else what else other than to put in there. But we have 4 parks, including Riverside Park, including Silverline Park. So that's what that is. And then we have that staggered out over the next, not this year, but the next 2 years. Town hall improvements, so replacement of the electronic sign outside, which is an embarrassment. Also, air quality and air handling in this building would be an eligible use, because the American Rescue Plan funds are really for COVID relief and COVID related, so air quality we know is eligible. And so that's what we're putting that in here. We know that we'll be looking at that as a comprehensive look at all of Town Hall as a facility and what are the future uses for this building. One of the things we spent some time talking with Vice Mayor and Commissioner Lunsford and the Mayor is related to Silverline Park. The work along the riverbank requires some additional protection for the river, which through the permitting process, now we've realized that expense is for a cofferdam. And a cofferdam simply is a buffer in the river, permitting people to work on dry riverbed in order to build up the embankment and rehabilitate the riverbank so it does not erode further, as well as building a boat ramp. So there's some decisions still to be made around that, and we're still in discussions around that too.
Yeah. So
talking with the general contractor today, there's some alternatives that later in this week we'll want to regroup and look at those.
Okay.
We believe the maximum that would cost would be $280,000 based on those preliminary estimates. We've looked at we talked about rollout carts for both recycling and trash. When I say we, I'll take credit, but Adrian's done it. Looked for a grant program for recycling carts. We believe that that can be fully funded. And so this purchases 3,000, I believe, carts. Oh, now my math is going to get off. I'm doing it in public. But it's $50 per cart, and however many carts that buys for trash, and the same number for recycling. There are no grants that we found that are available for trash rollout carts, but we do believe it would be in the town's best interest, for everyone's best interest, to have not just recycling without having trash rollout carts, but do both of those at the same time. That's still preliminary. That's a decision that you all will weigh in on and direct us. But for now, we put that in there to fund the trash cart rollout carts. And then finally, stormwater program improvements. So water improvements, wastewater, and stormwater are a very solid category of expenditures for which these funds may be used. And so what we have here is park infrastructure. That is from the master plan for Riverside Park. Those are the storm drain and stream restoration expenditures. Carve those out. That's 151. So we believe that that can help offset and reduce that funding gap overall for the park. Project management. So this is the portion that we talked about earlier, the 25% of that project manager's salary for the next 3 years to the completion of the parks. Well, we'll see about that. Plan development, so the stormwater plan, so we have a stormwater ordinance, we have a stormwater plan in draft form. The state requires much more detail on that. Once we have our mapping and we know the condition of our storm drain infrastructure, we'll be able to develop an informed plan, and that's what this is intended to do. So we will get some help from engineering firm to do this. We have a couple of options there, so I don't want to commit to the engineering firm. We have a couple of options. $10,000 is a placeholder there. Plan enforcement. So again, this is, once we have a plan, the county enforces to a certain level of disturbance. So anything below an acre, the county does not enforce. And one of the things that we'll be talking about, and I'm getting ahead of myself, is we believe it will be appropriate to enforce erosion control and stormwater management for disturbed acreage, disturbed land less than an acre. And so that's what that is beginning to do. That's what that is.
That would be just Woodfin staff.
Only Woodfin?
Yeah.
Well, or we would contract
With
a firm to do that. So the alternatives are, yes, hiring or outsourcing.
Right.
And then the general infrastructure, what we see here is about $900,000. That's just the plug to make the numbers match, because we know that the stormwater investments required over the next several years may well exceed that amount. So that is today our preliminary plan for you all. Unless you have major reservations or redirects, we will come back to you with a budget amendment, at which time we can also discuss it. So it's not like this is the last time to look at this.
So we can let you know if we had thoughts?
You sure can.
Okay.
And yes, and then we'll be asking for a vote next month. This is really just talk tonight.
Eric, under the general infrastructure, does that, some of that going toward paving of the roads?
Cannot be used for street paving. Cannot be used for park construction. Cannot be used for greenway construction. Expressly prohibited at this point in time. The final guidance hasn't come out from the U.S. Treasury just yet, but everything that we're hearing and learning, and Sherry and I are attending a lot of webinars on this too, from the governor's office and all the agencies. Those don't seem to be eligible expenditures or expenses for this program. However, there may be another, if investment funding, infrastructure passes, but that's.
What about
one of the
help
things,
with rent?
Yes.
So we could put that in there for people?
Yes,
Okay.
we certainly could. And the reason that we left it off of here is because the county is investing heavily in
Right.
that. And so we felt that was probably best left to the county to determine eligibility and rent assistance. We also had looked at, last year, you may recall, we applied for a CDBG grant, Community Development Block Grant, to fund a water line on Ingle Road.
That
grant
didn't
was
pass, though, did it?
Not approved. It would be an eligible use because of the water line. But we're talking with McGill about applying for that grant again.
Oh, good, good.
And so that's on the table, and that deadline is in September, I believe. So that'll come back
Do
to
you
probably
remember
next
what
month.
the cost was on that water line?
It was about, well, it was $1 million, is what I recall, and I don't know if that was the exact number. It was approximately $1 million to run that, was what they were estimating. But as a result of that, we would get a little bit of a repaved street over there. So because of the work of the water line, then that would be eligible. But of course, that was for the CDBG grant, which was perfectly eligible.
And I think we talked a little bit about, along the lines of the Victory Gardens, doing that wildlife advocacy. So we can kind of look at that too. So I'll get that information.
I think that can certainly be part of the materials that go along with that.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I think there's a couple of schools here, and a few schools.
Yes, that we're really
in
interested in.
Woodfin, some private schools, some public schools.
Yeah.
So that's seed money for that type of activity.
Okay. It's fun to spend money.
Scary.
My else is.
Well, any more that y'all comments, guidance? Okay, all right.
We'll send you our thoughts and that.
Sure, appreciate that. We welcome that. Greenway and Blueway. Some progress at Silverline Park. If you've not been down there in the last few weeks, there was an 8-foot berm that was put there decades ago. It extends over into Silverline Plastics, actually. It runs the length of that property. That's now been removed to restore this to its more original state. And what you can see in the photograph on the left is that's looking upstream. And so there's a bend in the river there. And then looking on the right, that's looking downstream from the park, a different vantage point in the park. And so that was kind of a thrill to drive down Woodfin Avenue and see the water.
Yeah.
And that's great. Not only just great, but that's how it should be. And then the coffer dam is part of this whole discussion. The flow of the river, the curve pushes the water right into that riverbank. It's just the hydraulics of it. And so anyway, that's going to be a challenge for us to work with our engineers and figure that out. But I just wanted to show these photographs because it was exciting. We had a construction meeting today for Silverline Park, and what you see here is the designer sketch for the Sunken pirate ship, which is a feature of Silverline Park. A contract, the price was one flat number of $75,000. Going through design and redesign and looking at alternatives, as well as factoring in the
lumber
increase in the materials costs, that price by this design is $212,000. A little shocker there. So the contractors have looked at that value engineering this particular feature, and what you see, the tall part in the middle, looks like a turret, is a crow's nest which has a spiral staircase in it. And if you remove that spiral staircase alone costs about $80-some thousand. And so that reduces the cost here then to $135,000, which is still more than what the contract had called for. To give you an idea, what the proposal is now is replacing that crow's nest with a couple of sails. And so here's a better image, so to mimic more like this on a pirate ship. So that crow's nest itself wasn't necessarily significant, but the cost sure was. So this is the proposed replacement for that. And so what will be coming our way, and once Judd Builders gets the final cost down, we expect that change order to come back in at about $60,000. And so what we do have is in contingency still for this particular project is $144,000, but also waiting in the wings. Now we have that whole cofferdam situation too. So we will probably eat up all of that contingency. My guess is that we will do that, depending on whether we use those American Rescue Fund plans for the other item.
We still have $144,000 we haven't used?
That's correct. That started at about $200,000.
But you're saying we could use those special funds?
Yes.
For the coffer if we had
It's
to?
eligible. It will be an eligible expenditure, yes.
Stop.
So Ronnie will consult and we get the numbers back in order to approve this change order. at the appropriate time, and we'll talk more about it.
That it is. Whether to change that crow's nest or leave it up there.
Was that?
On the change to the crow's nest.
Yes.
Make it go away for that much money. Good grief.
It seems like a good solution. There was a lot of discussion about how you make that safe. So there's a lot of engineering that went into making that safe for kids to climb. It seems prudent.
Without it to a mass, basically with a sail, it'd free up a lot more playing space on the deck.
And it would be as visible or more visible, so that's, as a feature of the park, it seems like a no.
135,000 was a really high price for that, so.
You know, at the beginning, we had a modular deal,
Yeah.
that was a little cheaper than that.
Yeah.
And in
We
hindsight,
wanted this to be unique to Woodfin. Anybody could buy a pad ship from those, I think we had 3 companies present us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway, this would be something that would be unique to Woodfin.
It'll make the park as far as the children's section.
I think it'll be pretty impressive.
It will.
The park is already impressive, and that's a wonderful feature. Overall, this is almost to the end of my talking. Overall, we talked about the project manager, which would be very critical to development of this park, and the whole project, so very excited about getting that person in place. The Parks and Greenways Advisory Committee is hard at work. I think we may have talked about some of these items last month. They're working on an inventory of our existing parks and the condition of those parks so that we can be strategic as to what we are replacing, taking care of what we already have built. Looking at branding and communications plan, and then recreation and parks programming, post-construction. What does that look like? We had a discussion with Equinox last week, with the feedback from the survey. So we had, jumping ahead to the Riverside Park and Whitewater Wave, we had requested public input into the design of Riverside Park. We're hoping to get 600 responses, got 672 responses. And a significant portion of those were from folks who are actually in Woodfin, not just those who would be traveling in from Buncombe County or wherever else to enjoy the park. So that was very exciting. A lot of the concerns are things that we have heard and that we've discussed. We've heard from various others too around parking and getting to the park, crossing Riverside Drive if I live in one of the neighborhoods. How do we manage the different uses? So people who are paddling versus people who are riding bikes through. And so those final decisions will come, so a recommendation will come back to you as to what changes to the master plan the Parks and Greenways Advisory Committee would recommend for that. Then we'll set Equinox off then with to continue the design. Riverlink is our partner for communications and fundraising. During this transition period when they're looking for a few key staff members, the town has taken back communications for that temporarily and working with them. And so again, working with Ryan, he's been really on it and helpful to get those things published on Facebook and to keep our materials current and fresh.
So they lost their communication person also?
They did.
Oh,
And their fundraising person and their
Oh,
executive
yeah,
director.
okay, great.
But they are hopeful to refill those gaps soon. Fundraising would be the one that we need to hit the ground running with their new development person. Silverline Park, again, there's phase 1, phase 2 of that park. Phase 1 is closer to Riverside Drive. Phase 2 is it's closer to the river. We received our final permit last month, and so we're moving forward. So that berm came down, using the dirt then to build up the base for the picnic pavilion. And so that's moving right along. The pending decisions for that expensive cofferdam. So we got to figure that out in the next week or so. The challenge there is we're now in hurricane season, and you know how that goes. train platform finally is above ground, and so they've been working on that for the last week, which is great. So the vertical construction includes the train platform, a boardwalk across the wetlands area, the construction of the pirate ship and the park pavilion. The completion of those is going to threaten the timeline. We had hoped to have that done by Labor Day. That's definitely not going to happen. So we're saying fall now. So we're talking with the general contractor, the prime contractor, about his subcontractor and what needs to happen there. So that's
The rain has not helped us. I mean, really, we were moving so much dirt, and you have to, I don't think that's anybody's fault.
And so then public building down there, we've done some hazardous materials testing. No asbestos, no lead paint, but some mold, as we can see. And so our plan now, I think the direction from this board has been to demolish the inside of the building, so take it back to the cinder block and the post construction, so it'll be posts and then the rafters, and then begin back from there, and then put out requests for who might wish to lease that space, working with an architect now to design restrooms, public restrooms under that roof.
Will the project manager also oversee that?
Yes.
Okay. I know you probably would prefer to do it, but anyway, I just was checking.
Riverside Park and Whitewater Wave, we've talked about greenways. We hosted here a couple of open houses last week with the owners of the properties through which greenways will run or adjacent to those greenways. And we sent out maybe 20, 25 invitations, and we had 5 or 6 that did come. Others have been asking questions outside of those meetings, but we've been working with them just to update them as to where the project is, where it's headed, and just to hear anything that's on their minds. The design and permitting, the timeline for the story here, this timeline for the greenways is extended quite a bit longer than we had thought. But Buncombe County, as the project manager, is not real content with that, so we'll continue to work on that.
You know, heck, what's a shame out of that survey, we couldn't even get a half the people from Woodford. That's what's terrible, in my opinion.
Yeah, the tools we used, we put flyers in various places around town. The advisory committee actually took those out and put them in storefronts in different places in schools. Went out through the schools, and that's what we get received. The budget is largely is entirely unchanged from the last time we met. The funding gap for the whole park project was $3.6 million, $3.7 million rounding for roughly $18.7 million project. So there's that. That's all we have to say.
It's a lot.
Any questions?
A lot going on.
Any questions for Eric? Okay. We have a need for our closed session tonight.
Yes, sir.
So at this point, I'll ask we have a motion to close this meeting and go into closed session.
Don't move.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, this meeting is adjourned, and take a 5-minute break and go into closed session. Get there, Ronnie.